There's something that happens when a trap built for someone else closes on the people who made it. Not as some poetic twist of fate, more like physics following its own logic, doing exactly what it was always going to do. Except one variable was never accounted for. What they built is called an energetic trap, a focused projection of low-frequency intent constructed from covert sabotage, defamation, emotional manipulation. Its purpose isn't complicated. It does one of two things. It drains life force energy from a target, or it pushes a person off the path they were meant to walk, far enough off that the work they came here to do simply doesn't get done. The opposition pours their will, their malice, their strategic intent into a dense projection and sends it across the distance between themselves and you. That projection carries information, lies shaped to wound, accusations timed to destabilize, social pressure calibrated to isolate. But the information isn't the weapon. The information is just the delivery system. The weapon is the kinetic charge underneath. For that weapon to land, one condition has to be met. It's called the Law of Resonant Coupling, and it governs every interaction between a hostile frequency and a human vessel. The principle is simple. A low-frequency projection can only lock onto a target carrying matching density. If the trap was built from fear, the target has to be carrying fear. If it was built to provoke defensiveness, the target has to be available to defend. If it was designed to trigger pride or the impulse toward revenge, those frequencies have to be somewhere inside the target's architecture, active, accessible, waiting to be struck like a tuning fork. That matching density is what the trap requires. Without it, the incoming wave has nothing to grip. It passes through, slides off. It cannot couple. This is what most people never understand about the attacks that shaped their lives. They believe the attack worked because it was powerful. In most cases, it worked because they provided the anchor point. They were carrying fear, so the fear-based projection found its mark. They were carrying unresolved rage, so the rage trap coupled perfectly. They were still defending a version of themselves they should have moved past, and that defensiveness gave the opposition everything they needed. A handhold, a seam, a place where the lower frequency could lock on and begin its work. Once coupled, the trap starts to destabilize the aura. It drains vitality. It pulls the person off their path and into a reactive state that exhausts them faster than anything they've faced before. The target ends up tired in a way sleep can't fix, foggy in a way clarity can't cut through, isolated in a way that feels specifically designed. Pause because it was. This isn't metaphor. I've watched it happen to people I loved. I've felt the edges of it myself, in seasons where I was still carrying things I hadn't surrendered. And the terrifying thing about resonant coupling is how quiet it is. The trap doesn't announce itself. It feels like bad luck, like a rough season, like the ordinary resistance everyone faces at some point. You don't realize you've been hooked until weeks or months have passed and you look up to find yourself operating at a fraction of what you were, with no explanation that quite makes sense. That's how the mechanism works. That's what it was designed to do. But here's what the opposition never accounted for. When a trap is constructed against a cleared, sovereign soul, something else happens entirely. The trap still generates its kinetic charge. The opposition's intent is real, and the energy they put into it is real. Universal law is clear on this. Energy set in motion has to resolve its trajectory. It can't evaporate into nothing. It can't dissipate without landing somewhere. It needs a point of absorption, somewhere to ground, somewhere to complete the circuit that was opened the moment they launched it. If the target is clear, if they've done the work, surrendered the fear and the pride and the need to defend, the trap finds nothing. No anchor. No scene, no resonant point where it can lock. And the kinetic charge, already in motion, already committed, cannot simply stop. It cannot reverse on its own, so it accumulates. It builds pressure inside the container the opposition themselves constructed. The void they dug receives no external momentum to sustain it, and the momentum they supplied becomes its own problem. It turns inward, it pressurizes. And eventually, not a question of if, only of when, the container fails. The trap collapses back onto the people who built it with a force equal to everything they poured in. This is what the old texts were pointing to, long before we had language for any of this. It's a description of an enclosed energetic void designed to trap a target's momentum. And the return of the stone is the kinetic reversal that follows when the target refuses to provide what the void requires. The principle was documented thousands of years ago. The part of you that could be intimidated. The part that could be baited into self-defense. The part that still believed the trap was personal instead of physics. When that was gone, what grew back in its place was something their instruments can't read and their strategies can't reach. Do you know the exact moment that happened, the specific point where the fear stopped feeling like yours? Pause. The opposition built their entire strategy on one assumption, that you would react, that the smear would provoke a defense, that the legal ambush would trigger panic, that the isolation would generate enough pain to push you into the reactive state where their trap could finally couple the planning, the timing, the coordination between multiple parties, the careful construction of a narrative designed to find your most vulnerable points. All of it was calibrated against a single predicted outcome. Your reaction. Without your reaction, the architecture has no flaw. Without your anchor, the wave has no shore. That's what they're discovering right now. Not as theory. Not as warning. As operational reality unfolding inside their own lives, while you sat still, while you refused the bait, while you let the silence speak for you, while whatever was working in the background worked, without your commentary, without your panic, without your participation. The trap they built for the chosen ones just closed on them instead. What happens to a wave when the shore it was built to strike simply disappears? That question isn't theoretical anymore, not for the people who built this. Whatever they are watching unfold inside their own organizations, their own finances, their own inner circles, it didn't begin recently. The reversal now becoming visible had to start somewhere, a specific moment. A specific failure when their mechanism reached out and found nothing to grip. Sovereign stillness. Those are the only two words that come close to naming what you were doing while they built their architecture against you. Most people hear stillness and picture passivity. Waiting, doing nothing while something is done to you. That's not what this was. Sovereign stillness is something far more specific. It's not the absence of motion, it's the complete regulation of every internal frequency that would have given the incoming charge something to grab. Emotion fully governed, not suppressed, governed. A cold neutrality that doesn't lean forward to defend itself. Doesn't send the explanation, doesn't post the clarifying message, make the phone call, ask the mutual friend what's being said. Zero public defense. None. And the reason that matters is that public defense is still defense. It still broadcasts the exact frequency the trap was built to detect. The trap locks on. What you did instead had no category in their strategic framework. You offered nothing, no resistance, no engagement, no anchor point of any kind. It can't dissipate into heat or friction, because dissipation requires a medium, something that receives the charge, even partially, a shore that gives the waves somewhere to land. You were not that shore, so the full force of what they launched underwent what the mechanics describe as an immediate kinetic reversal. Not gradual, not partial, immediate. Every unit of energy they had invested, the planning, the coordination, the months spent carefully constructing a narrative designed to destroy you, all of it reflected directly backward along its original path, and that path leads straight back to the people who launched it. They were not prepared for what returned. Nobody who builds a trap ever is. The entire psychology of entrapment rests on one assumption, that the target absorbs the blow, reacts, defends, panics, does something that catches the incoming energy and holds it. The originators don't brace for a return because in their model, there is no return. The energy goes out, it lands, it does its damage, and that's the end of it. There's no contingency for reversal. No reinforcement on the back side of the architecture. No emotional preparation for what it feels like to receive all at once, undiluted, the full return of every destructive intention they aimed at you. The psychological literature calls what happens next narcissistic collapse. The esoteric mechanics have a more precise term, the self-inflicted snap. It's called self-inflicted because nobody did this to them. You didn't retaliate. You didn't send anything back. You didn't counter with a weapon of your own. The energy now moving through their lives is exclusively the energy they generated themselves, manufactured by their own intent, calibrated by their own malice, stored inside their own architecture during every week and month they spent building the trap. When it returned, when it snapped back along the path they'd never reinforced because they never imagined it operating in both directions, it hit them with a force they had no capacity to absorb. What that collapse looks like, in practice, is 3 specific outcomes. I want to name them plainly, because recognizing them confirms that what I'm describing is not theory. The first is systemic exposure, the exact lies, the specific smear campaigns, the legal traps they built, the things they were certain would never see daylight, begin leaking into the open. Not because you leaked them, not because you contacted anyone, filed anything, or defended yourself in any forum. The exposure comes through third-party disclosures, administrative audits that surface documents no one was meant to see, an email forwarded to the wrong person, a conversation overheard by someone who was never supposed to be in the room. The architecture of concealment collapses from within because the same returning force carries an exposure function. The hidden thing becomes visible. The whispered thing grows loud. The private scheme becomes public knowledge, and the people who built it are left standing in full view of everyone they were trying to deceive, with no story left that holds together. The second is resource depletion. Building a trap is expensive, not only financially, though the cost of legal maneuvers, coordinated campaigns, sustained opposition is real and measurable. It costs emotional capital, social capital, the energy required to maintain a false narrative across multiple audiences without letting the seams show. When the trap snaps back, all of that drains at once. The reserves they drew on to fund the attack are suddenly gone. The alliances they formed to support the operation start demanding repayment, and the reputation they assumed would survive this intact begins to erode because once the exposure hits, the fiction of good faith is impossible to maintain. Insolvency arrives. Not always financial, though sometimes that too, but the deeper insolvency, having spent everything on a weapon that didn't just fail but returned. The third is alliance fracturing. This one happens fast. The people who helped build the trap, who provided information, amplified the narrative, lent their credibility to something they believed would succeed. They begin turning on each other the moment the reversal hits, because nobody wants to own the failure. Nobody wants to be the one who suggested the strategy that backfired or vouched for the plan that collapsed. Blame moves through the group the way fire moves through dry timber. The alliances that seemed solid during construction, the whispered conversations, the private messages, the careful coordination, all of it shatters under the weight of one question nobody wants to answer: whose fault was this? Here's what you need to sit with for a moment. None of those three outcomes asked anything of you. That's the rebound reciprocation law at its most stripped down. Any trap dug for someone who carries no matching darkness automatically becomes the burial ground of the person who dug it. Not sometimes. Not under the right conditions. Automatically. Because this isn't conditional. It moves the way physics moves. The energy always had to land somewhere. The only real question was whether it would land in your field, which would have required something in you to receive it, some density it could grip, or find its way back to where it came from. And whatever it needed to grip in you had already been burned away long before they made their move. You didn't win a battle. That's too small a frame for what happened. A battle has two sides pushing against each other, a winner, a loser. What actually happened is closer to what happens when a wave breaks against a cliff. The wave doesn't lose. It simply has nowhere left to go except back into the water that sent it. And the sea receives it exactly as it was. Nothing taken out of it, every ounce of force still intact. They're discovering this right now, not as a lesson, not as a warning someone gave them. As the actual conditions of their own lives. The smear they launched is smearing them. The legal mechanism they built to catch you is catching them. The isolation they tried to engineer for you is closing around them. Every component of the attack has flipped direction. And the only person whose participation was ever needed was the one who refused to give it. There are signs in the environment when the reversal has finished moving through. You don't have to go looking for them. The background hostility just drops. That atmospheric pressure you've been living inside, the low hum of it suddenly releases, like something that's been running for months finally goes quiet. Unexpected disclosures surface. Confessions appear through channels you never opened. And you'll start catching specific number sequences. 888, the signature of structural justice and material rebalancing, running alongside 777, the confirmation that your path is sealed and protected. These aren't coincidences. The environment is completing its report. The trap has closed. The people who built it are inside it, and you're still standing exactly where you were, in the same posture, refusing to be the shore the wave needed. Pause. So the question isn't whether it's happened. It has. The question is what you're meant to do, if anything, while what's left of the structure finishes coming down. The most dangerous moment in a reversal isn't when the trap snaps. It's the few seconds after, because something in us wants to look. Wants to see the damage, wants to know that what was aimed at you actually landed on the person who aimed it. And that instinct, completely human, almost involuntary, is the exact thing that reopens a file that was just closed on your behalf. I've learned this the hard way. The zero interference mandate is not a preference. It's not spiritual advice you can weigh against other advice. It's an operational order from a court whose authority was established long before yours, and stepping outside it doesn't make you powerful. It makes you a grounding rod. Think about what a grounding rod actually does. It doesn't fight the current. It doesn't resist. It just offers a path of least resistance, and the current, which was headed somewhere else entirely, takes it. Immediately. No deliberation. That's what reaching back toward a collapsing structure does. You don't change the collapse. You don't speed it up or slow it down. You just become the path through which its energy bleeds into a field it was never supposed to touch again. And they get relief. A partial discharge. Some of what should have fallen entirely on their architecture now has somewhere else to go. Pause you. The mandate is absolute. 3 directives, no exceptions. The first is zero communication. No messages, no calls. Observation is a form of contact. It sends something across the space between you, thinner than a word but still conductive, still capable of carrying a charge. Don't ask mutual people for updates. Don't open an old thread just to see if they've said anything. Don't give yourself permission to verify what you already know. The act of verifying is the act of reconnecting. And I know some of you watching this are thinking, this is just content, dressed up in spiritual framing to give it more weight than it actually has. I've had that thought about transmissions exactly like this one. So I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to watch what happens to the person who reaches back. The proof isn't in what I'm telling you. It's in the life of the person who didn't listen. The second directive is zero rescue. You were the one who held atmospheres together, the uncredited, unacknowledged stability underneath family systems, workplaces, relationships that only stayed upright because you absorbed what no one else could. Rescue isn't a flaw in you. It's a reflex. It's the first thing your nervous system moves toward when something starts to shake, which is exactly why they'll reach out, not to make things right. Not to repair anything real. They'll reach toward you because their internal structure is in freefall and somewhere in the body. They remember that you used to catch things. They remember what your presence felt like when it was steadying theirs. So they'll send something that looks like an apology. They'll find a crisis that seems like only you can resolve it. They'll dress the reaching as remorse, as change, as the very thing you spent years hoping to see from them. Don't move toward it. Let the court finish what it started without your interference. This isn't cruelty. It isn't punishment for its own sake. It's the mechanical consequence of a law that was set in motion before you took your first breath. And if you step between that law and the person it's moving toward, you don't stop it. Pause, you become what it's moving toward. The third directive is simple: zero public commentary. Real authority doesn't cheer at wreckage. It doesn't wave its hands. It doesn't post something vague that everyone in the room will quietly understand as a reference to someone's collapse. It doesn't celebrate, not in public, not in private with people who have no reason to know. It treats cosmic justice the way a clerk treats a closed file, because that's exactly what it is. A ledger entry. A debt that was carried and then paid. The court doesn't hold a press conference when accounts are settled. It stamps the document and moves on. You do the same. Hold your seat. Keep building. Walk in the same quiet authority you've been carrying since the isolation began. The stillness that refused to be ashore for their wave, that same stillness refuses to applaud when the wave turns back and drowns them. Not because you feel nothing, not because some part of you doesn't recognize the completion of the arc, but because that satisfaction is a private frequency. Broadcasting it doesn't amplify it. It dilutes it. The pull to re-engage isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It means the trap was well built. Every piece of it, the smear, the legal pressure, the isolation they carefully engineered, was designed to produce a reaction they could use. The trap may have closed, but the bait is still there. The bait is that question that keeps surfacing. Did it work? Did they feel it? Do they understand what they did? That question isn't closure. It's a hook, and the barb is still sharp. If you take it, if you send the message, check the profile, ask a mutual friend what they've heard, you won't find what you're looking for. What you'll do is send a pulse of your own frequency directly into a sinking ship. One pulse. Enough to seal a hole that was meant to swallow them. Enough to let them surface for another week when the collapse was supposed to finish in a day. enough to pull you back into a gravitational field you've already left behind. Don't look back, not even for a second. This isn't punishment, it's a perimeter around something that's already been sealed, and the seal holds unless you break it yourself. Pause. The confirmation, when it comes, won't need interpreting. It won't arrive as a feeling you have to talk yourself into believing. It will show up as something you can point to. Something in the physical world you move through every day. 4 distinct signatures that the trap has closed in a way nothing beneath the frequency that sealed it can undo. The first comes through a channel you didn't create and couldn't have controlled. The exposure arrives without prompting, and that absence of prompting is the whole point. If you'd driven it, they could say you manufactured it, but you didn't drive it. You were somewhere else, continuing your work, expanding your domain, walking in the same quiet that never needed anyone else's collapse to justify itself. When the news reached you through a gap in a conversation you weren't supposed to hear, what makes the moment recognizable isn't what gets said. It's how it travels. It moves through people who have no stake in your vindication, no awareness they're completing anything, no knowledge of what machinery they're part of. The person who said it thought they were sharing gossip. They were delivering a confirmation from a court whose jurisdiction they don't recognize and whose verdict they can't appeal. The pressure that snapped back into the originator's own structure built until containment failed, and the failure announced itself not through anything you did, but through third-party disclosures that arrived already complete. They asked nothing of you except to notice. You weren't the instrument. You were the witness, and a witness, by definition, arrives after the verdict has already been rendered. The second signature is harder to describe, but you won't miss it. What replaces the pressure isn't warmth exactly. It's stillness. A quiet so complete it feels strange at first, like stepping outside and realizing the wind stopped mid-gust. You brace for the next impact. It doesn't come. You reach for your phone expecting the familiar tension. It's not there. The de-escalation doesn't build gradually, it arrives overnight. And here's what's underneath that. The atmospheric pressure the trap was maintaining couldn't sustain itself once the power source was severed. The people who were feeding hostility into your field are now fully occupied with their own collapse. They don't have the bandwidth to keep running a campaign against you. That campaign needed constant maintenance, constant feeding, constant reinforcement through recruited allies, and the moment they had to redirect their attention, the whole structure began to decompress. What you feel as sudden peace is just what happens when an energetic pressure system dissolves. But something precise needs to be said here. This stillness is not the silence you've carried for years. That silence was a quarantine, something walling you off from frequencies that would have contaminated what was still being built in you. This is different. This isn't the silence of isolation. It's the silence of completion. It feels like a machine that's been running since before you can remember finally shutting off. You didn't realize how much noise it was making because the noise had become your baseline. Now that it's gone, the absence is the loudest thing in the room, and if you're paying attention, you'll notice the silence isn't empty. There's something else in it entirely. The third and fourth signatures are numerical, and when they come, don't receive them as superstition. Receive them as signal. Pattern repeats because it's the language structure uses to speak to itself. When the same sequence starts showing up across unrelated parts of your life, timestamps, receipts, addresses, confirmation numbers, you're not being handed a lucky sign. Something in the architecture of your reality has just been reorganized. And the pattern is how it announces that. The sequence is 888. What it confirms is not simply that things will be okay. It confirms the ledger is being corrected in real time. Every resource that was diverted from your life by the trap, every intercepted opportunity, every door sealed by someone else's fear of what you carry, every season of lack that was engineered rather than natural, all of it is now being processed. Not as a promise. Not as a someday. It's already in motion. 888 is the tracking number. When you see it on a clock at the exact moment you're quietly asking whether the provision is real, that's not coincidence. When it appears on a financial statement the same day the exposure reaches you, that's not random. That's the material world reorganizing itself around a verdict that was rendered before the material world had anything to say about it. 777 comes alongside it, but confirms something different. 888 says the balance is being corrected. 777 says the perimeter is being held. It's not protection as a feeling or a comfort, it's protection as a functioning reality. What 777 signals is that the boundary around your life is now sealed against anything operating on the same frequency as the trap that just collapsed. The originators can't rebuild and try again. The mechanism they used can't be adapted and redeployed. The seal doesn't just address one violation, it writes the conditions so that violation becomes structurally impossible going forward. This is why the stillness you feel isn't temporary, not because the opposition ran out of desire, but because their access was revoked at a level they can neither appeal nor find their way back to. Pause. The fourth signature you won't need to search for. Your body will register it before your mind can name it. A breath you didn't realize you were holding, one you may have been holding for years, will simply release itself. Not as a promise. Not as a someday. It's already in motion. 888 is the tracking number. When you see it on a clock at the exact moment you're quietly asking whether the provision is real, that's not coincidence. When it appears on a financial statement the same day the exposure reaches you, that's not random. That's the material world reorganizing itself around a verdict that was rendered before the material world had anything to say about it. 777 comes alongside it, but confirms something different. 888 says the balance is being corrected. 777 says the perimeter is being held. It's not protection as a feeling or a comfort, it's protection as a functioning reality. What 777 signals is that the boundary around your life is now sealed against anything operating on the same frequency as the trap that just collapsed. The originators can't rebuild and try again. The mechanism they used can't be adapted and redeployed. The seal doesn't just address one violation, it writes the conditions so that violation becomes structurally impossible going forward. This is why the stillness you feel isn't temporary. Not because the opposition ran out of desire, but because their access was revoked at a level they can neither appeal nor find their way back to. Pause. The fourth signature you won't need to search for. Your body will register it before your mind can name it. A breath you didn't realize you were holding, one you may have been holding for years, will simply release itself.